I want to touch on both of you point of the situation. Have we been here before? And Steve, I agree with you and disagree with you about, well, we're into uncharted territory. We have been here basically before, twice, 1890 and 1910. The percentages were almost just barely below what we are right now. So that's good. We have some history to see, well, how did we do last time? Now, what's uncharted is the fact that it's continuing. It's continuing to go up because after 1910, we had World War I, which pretty much ended immigration for 3 or 4 years. It picked back up again, but then in 1921, 1924, Congress passed a law, and Calvin Coolidge signed it. Actually, I guess Harding signed the first one, and Coolidge signed the second one to end the Great Wave. So the percentages did not get above where they are now. So what was it? What was it like last time? Well, I began writing, researching, speaking on this immigration issue pretty much full time in the early 90s. Throughout the 90s, I don't think there's ever a audience that wasn't a total border hawk type audience where somebody didn't speak up, and often more than one, and say, I don't know what the problem is. As a percentage of the population, foreign-born is not much more than half of what it was at its peak. Of course, that's sort of the idea. The trend was going this way. So to basically say we shouldn't be concerned about this trend because it's at this point, the question is, in real policy making, and you want to kind of think, well, where are we headed? Well, those kind of people, and I would say most people in Congress, most politicians, most media, that was the point. Not concerned about where we're headed. It was like, well, where are we right now? Well, we're just barely half of what we were at the peak. And of course, there's the implication is everything was great. We've been here before. I mean, we've had twice as much. Things were great when we were at 14.8 and 14.7%. Well, it doesn't take much to look at history to know things weren't great. So I want to talk a little bit about where were we in 1890 and where were in the 1890s and the 1910s whenever we're just below where we are now. I'll start off by saying that between 1890 and 1910, that area was studied by these great economic historians, Hatton and Williamson, from Ivy League schools. They're sort of at the end of their careers now, but they put their life into studying economic history. And this is an astounding statistic. It's a number that they've worked out from all of their efforts, that the level of immigration between 1890 and 1910 held back urban wages for Americans by 34%. So Americans in 1910, the workers, and that includes the immigrants too, were making 34% less than they would have been making if not for that great wave of immigration. So there were real economic consequences. But I guess the American people were okay with that. Well, no, they weren't okay with that. The great immigration historian, John Hyam, who's usually quoted by immigration cornucopians, loved immigration, but he was a realist too, and he's a true historian. His take on that period when we were here before at these kind of percentages was that from 1890 through the 19-teens, that immigration, that high-level immigration, created, and I'm get the words here, immense cultural divisions and violence across the country, and also precipitated the greatest success of the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan had its greatest success and was a nationwide movement, not after the Civil War, not in the 1800s, but it was by the 1910s. the social economic disruption that was caused by having, in 1990, 14.7% of the population foreign-born, and having risen so quickly at that point, was violence, cultural division. Well, and an increase in various kinds of racial hatred. This is not totally out of sync with what's happened between 1990 and 2010 and 2020. So we've been here before, and we should not be shocked by where we are. Did the politicians, have we been here before too, with the politicians ignoring this the whole time? Well, this is uncharted territory, Rich, because there's never been a time that the politicians have been this quiet about looking at, or that the news media was full of coverage on this issue. Politicians talked about it all the time. Between 1897, that's 7 years after we hit that first peak in 1890, between 1897 and 1924, either the House or the Senate 18 times passed legislation to stop the Great Wave. 18 times. 4 times, they both did it in the same year, and Grover Cleveland vetoed the first time. Taft, Cleveland, a Democrat, Taft, a Republican, vetoed it the second time, and then Wilson, a Democrat, vetoed it 2 more times. So the American people, through their representatives, other than the presidents, they recognized what was going on. It was a bad thing, and it's a bad thing now. I want to say, and I'll give it back to you, Mark. I want to pick at, it's hard to find something to pick at Steve's work. So I just want to say, his using immigration for all foreign-born. Some people, that's a little much. It's like immigrants. Immigrants for foreign-born. Immigrants that's a legal term, and you're allowing illegal aliens to be called immigrants. So I want to state that, but for the sake of brevity, you do that. But this is interesting. I've sort of have been sensitive to the lawyers who say, "Oh, they're not. That's not all immigrants." So I've been using migrants for a few years, and the news media has. I kind of like the fact that they're using migrants more than calling illegal aliens immigrants all the time. But I was speaking to a grassroots rally last month in Chicago, south side of Chicago. We brought up what's going on there, and these are African American communities, the African American Community House. What's happening there? They're losing their community facilities. Their educational facilities are being overrun. All kinds of things are being used to house and take care of all of these migrants that are coming through in various ways. Well, I got my comeuppance on using the term migrants. A woman stood up in the crowd, and the crowd was cheering her on. He goes, "Those are not migrants. These people that are being housed, that the mayor is forcing us to house in our centers, those aren't migrants. Just, we are migrants." So that's interesting. And then other people spoke up. Says, "We're migrants because they consider themselves migrants because their families migrated from the South in the Great Migration." Well, semantics can sometimes get you off. You get too many things. But it's interesting to be reminded that, and I ask people, how many people here in this auditorium that your families migrated in the Great Migration that happened between World War I and 1965? Well, almost every single hand went up. They are children of migrants. That's the way they consider themselves. And that's the last point, is that when politicians, media, religious leaders, black leaders, union leaders finally had a majority push to stop the great wave of migration and stop this percentage from going up as far as it's gone now, to stop that trend, we got a wonderful pause, not a total pause, but cut annual immigration by about 2/3, and it allowed the Great Migration. This the people who think that keeping this trend going is somehow or another humanitarian.
You mean allowed the Great Migration from the South?
Not the immigration wave, but the Great Migration from the South that allowed it was
because those jobs were there,
and they could go north, they could go west, and they had huge economic progress until the latest immigration wave began in the 1880s. So one of the most important things that anybody who's concerned about the disproportionate level of poverty and near poverty in our African American population, the most important thing that happened would be tightening the labor market and stopping this trend that Steve has written about.